So tell us about, this is your third film, but your first US set picture. So why is Lingua Franca your passion project?
Yes, so it's, it's like you said, it's my third feature, but it feels like my first. Aside from the fact that it's my first to be set in and shot in the US, it's also my first after my gender transition. So I wanted to really make a statement with Lingua Franca being my first after my transition. And that's why I took on the multiple creative hats that I did. I wrote and directed the film. I also edited and co-produced it, but I also played the lead role. And so I wanted to really establish myself as the creative force behind the film, both in front of and behind the camera. And when I started writing the script for Lingua Franca, it was more of a straightforward romantic drama. This was in 2015. So the premise is really about a Filipino trans woman in New York City who was becoming romantically involved with a cisgender white man, American man. But then halfway through writing the script, the 2016 presidential election happened and Trump got into the White House. And like many immigrants and minorities at that time, I felt like I was plunged into a kind of existential despair and feeling anxiety and uncertainty about what life would be like, under the Trump administration. And that's when the final premise of Lingua Franca came together, and Olivia became a Filipino trans woman who was also an undocumented immigrant. And I really channeled my mental and emotional state during the first 6 months of the Trump administration into what became the prevailing mood and atmosphere of Lingua Franca.
Mm-hmm. And you're a trans woman, colored, immigrant. So there are so many hurdles to, jump over and challenges. What did you do to be able to manage and hurdle all these challenges?
Yeah, I think part of it was not letting these intersectional labels that are meant to marginalize us, overwhelm me or intimidate me. At the end of the day, I'm still a person. I am a storyteller and an artist, and I believed in the validity of my own voice in my story. That my experience deserves to be seen and heard, and I sought out the support of like-minded Filipino immigrant artists like Tony and Grammy Award-winning Broadway producer Jet Tolentino, who's the lead producer in the film, as well as Carlo Vallejo, Darlene Malimas, and we also partnered with TBA, who is a co-producer in the film, as well as Front Row Philippines. So, of course, I did not make this within the Hollywood system, because this is not the kind of story that they're looking to bank and support. But within the industry, that around the industry, there are immigrant artists that seek out and really champion stories like this, stories that talk about lives and experiences that would be otherwise invisible in a major Hollywood production. And I'm glad that I had the privilege to work with these people.
Mm-hmm. And the film also talks about homophobia. So talk about when you came out, what is the reaction by family and friends, and what were the challenges in being such, the bullying you experienced and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I was raised by my mom, so my mom was a single parent, but she's always been supportive from the start. It didn't hurt that I was an achiever academically. I graduated valedictorian in high school from the Sacred Heart School in Cebu, and I graduated summa cum laude at University of San Carlos in Cebu as well. So, and right after graduation, I supported my mother financially. And so when I told my mom that I was trans, of course, we're a Catholic country and this is not a common thing. And I bawled my eyes out before, and it took me an hour of crying before I managed to get the words out that I was trans. And, that night she didn't completely understand me, but then she told me that, at the end of the day, you're still my child and I love you and I care for you and I support you in whatever you wanted to do. So it was a process, but eventually my mom came around and supported me. And I'm just glad that with the success that Lingua Franca has been having, that I can say that my mom is proud of me and what I've accomplished since.
So there's also the depiction of sexuality among in the trans character in the film, and it was really
Yeah.
bold of you to do that. So talk about how, why is it important for you to show that, and also casting Imon Feren.
Yes, I think, just in terms of portraying female sexuality in American cinema, it's so rare and that it's, startling when you see that. And if there's ever sex scenes involving women, they're almost always the passive object of that male gaze. They're the ones, being desired. But what I wanted to do in Lingua Franca is to kind of pioneer that not just the female gaze, but the trans female gaze. There are two sensual scenes in the film. The first one was a fantasy sensual scene, and it's radical and subversive because in this scene, it's the trans woman that's actively desiring. Um, and the fact that she's the one who is the active agent in this desire, it feels like such an assertion of personhood, um, and visibility for her. And in terms of casting Eamon Farren, I was a big fan of Eamon. He was in Twin Peaks: The Return, that series by David Lynch. He played a villain there, but I thought he had a very fascinating character actor presence and face. He reminds me of a young Christopher Walken, actually, in that he exudes that combination of unpredictability and vulnerability that you don't know what he's going to do next. And I thought he was a perfect, fit for Alex in that sense. I also did not want to cast some generic, bland TV pretty boy for that role. I wanted the actor to be able to convey an emotional complexity.
Mhm. I also like
You know,
the
a-
friendship between the two trans, and you showing that it's important to have support from friends like that. So tell
yes,
me why that was very important in the movie.
yeah, and I think that's also having two trans characters, trans Filipino women who are friends with each other in an American film is also another way for me to deepen the characterization and to add multiple facets to these trans women characters in the film. And I think by setting two of those scenes right at church, there's something that might be jarring because the experience of being trans and spirituality are not always paired together, let alone in an American film. And so by also having these two trans characters that have different experiences, like in Olivia's case, she is paying an American citizen to marry her for a green card, whereas in Trixie's case, she is actually in a healthy and nurturing romantic relationship where her American boyfriend is and fiance is offering to marry her out of love. So I think just the diversity of the experience of Filipino trans women here, also gives you imbues that experience with a certain richness, and that there's not one monolithic story about what it means to be a Filipino trans woman in the US. There are multiple experiences that showcase that.
Mhm. And your movie is also streamed in Netflix, and it was picked up also by Ava DuVernay's Array
Yes.
releasing. Not everybody gets to get that chance. That's a big thing here in Hollywood. So Tell me how
Yeah,
you did it.
gosh, what a dream come true to be, acquired by the Ava DuVernay. But, it all started last October because Ava's company, Film Distribution Collective Array, is based in the Filipino neighborhood, the historic Filipino town in LA, and they were mounting an inaugural film series for Filipino American History Month. At that time, we hadn't had yet our US premiere. We just premiered in Venice, which is our world premiere, but we hadn't had our US premiere yet. So our sales agent advised us to wait to premiere at a festival. We eventually did at AFI Fest, but we stayed in touch with Ava's team. And so in May, they came back to us with an offer, to distribute the film in North America. So of course, we jumped at the opportunity, and working with Ava and her team has just been a tremendously rewarding experience. They worked very hard to get the film out, and as a result, we've had stellar press coverage in outlets like Vanity Fair. The LA Times ran a profile on me. We were also in Salon, Elle, New York Magazine, and you know, Lingua Franca found its audience among the members of the queer community, the Filipino American community, and also just film lovers. So it's gotten some great responses, and people are still talking about it in social media.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of accolades already in Venice Film Festival and everywhere. Why do you think people
Yeah.
kind of relate to your movie? Why do they gravitate to it and, you know, feel that they are part of it?
Yeah, I think it's first, on paper, it can sound like a textbook social issue drama. It touches on immigration and the transgender experience. On the one hand, that can alienate a lot of people because, that story is about a very particular experience of a specific person. There are not, many people are not undocumented immigrants, and many people are not trans. But I think the reason why the film resonated with them is that the people who end up watching it are surprised, by the direction that it takes in terms of its story. It's not predictable. Like a lot of stories that feature trans women characters who become intimate with cisgender men almost always tend to feature instances or episodes of physical violence, and lingua franca avoids that. And instead of being preachy and didactic, which a lot of social issue driven films tend to be, it's delicate, it's quiet, it's subtle. And because of that, because of how it subverts audience expectations, they feel like it's giving them a unique and singular emotional experience, that you don't usually get from films like this. It doesn't feel predictable.
Mhm. When did you decide to become a filmmaker, and who are your influences, whether Filipino or
Yes.
American or?
Um, I've heard it said before that we don't choose our passions choose us. So sometimes you just gravitate to or get drawn to, like as an artistic person, a writer would not be able to stop thinking about words, writing them on a page. And for me, I grew up, my creative outlet was I would come up with scenes in my mind and I would string them together, these moving images and pictures and stories about characters. And that's how I became a filmmaker. I mean, that's how I knew I wanted to become a filmmaker. But the decision to pursue it as a calling and as a career, took a lot longer because, I was of the mindset for a long time that filmmaking was not really a grown-up career, that it was risky and there's not you don't know if you're going to succeed and there's going to be job security, but I'm glad that I stuck with it. Yeah, and I'm just grateful that I get to pursue, to call to find work in something that I feel passionate about, that I wake up every morning raring to express myself creatively in this field. And with the success of Lingua Franca, I'm starting to get offers from Hollywood studios to work on new projects, and it feels like such a validation because I made Lingua Franca to be very a very personal film that's also uncompromising, and for Hollywood to sit up and take notice precisely because I made the movie that I wanted to make, and I didn't simply conform to established formulas, is that they're really rewarding a voice that's unique and authentic and singular.
Who are your influences or inspirations
Yes,
among Filipino?
influences. Ishmael Bernal is, I think, the greatest Filipino filmmaker. I know in a list for the Criterion Collection, I included Lino Brocas in Siang as one of the greatest Filipino films, but my favorite Filipino director is Ishmael Bernal. I mean, what a spectacular roster, a body of work. Manila by Night, Himala, um, Nunal sa Tubig, and my other influences, which are apparent in Lingua Franca, are Wong Kar-wai, In the Mood for Love is an influential film for me, especially during my formative years as a filmmaker. And also Rainer Werner Fassbinder, the German filmmaker who was very prolific in the 70s. So he made films like Ali Fear Eats the Soul, about an interracial couple in Germany, which also partly inspired Lingua Franca. And then there's also the Russian Jewish American filmmaker James Gray, who set a few of his films in Brighton Beach, including Two Lovers with Joaquin Phoenix and Gwyneth Paltrow.
Mhm. So are you pinching yourself now that all these things are happening to you right now? Your dream come true? Are you still pinching
Oh my
yourself?
gosh, yes, it's been such a surreal ride. Since Venice last year, and yeah, I'm just grateful for all the people that I've had the good fortune to collaborate with, and Lingua Franca from the outset has been quite a gamble, because this is not the kind of film that you expect to be successful or to resonate with, you know, as many audiences as it has. But I think it's really a testament to authenticity and not compromising about a vision that you feel very strongly about. So I dedicate the success of the film to the people that I work with, and also especially to the late great actress Lynn Cohen, who played Olga in the film and who passed earlier this year.
Oh. So if you were given a chance to change anything in the film, what would it be?
Um, I think I would develop Olga's story a lot more. We actually tried to do that when we shot the film, and there were more scenes of her in speaking Russian to allude to her background as an immigrant from Ukraine. We She wasn't too keen on working with a dialogue coach that we hired on set, and I did insist because we only had 16 days to shoot the film. But if we had more days, I would have asked Lynn to work more closely with the dialogue coach, because I initially wanted Olivia and Olga to be equally major characters in the film, and that's one thing I would have changed.
Mhm. And your future projects? What are your future projects?
Yes. So as of I'm not able to share it, in public yet, but as of a few weeks ago, I'm now being repped as a writer director by a major Hollywood talent agency. So I'm very excited about that. And they also rep some major, Hollywood directors, one of whom recently won an Oscar this year. And I am writing you know, the pilot for a TV series that I was acquired by a cable channel back in August. So I'm doing that right now, and I'm working on a final revision for the script for my next feature film entitled Tropical Gothic. And that one is set in 1570 in the Philippines about a babaylan, who's a native priestess who pretends to be possessed by the spirit of her Spanish master's dead bride
Mm,
in order to avenge her dispossession. So it has echoes of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo.
mm. So, what would you
So
advise young filmmakers like you who would like to jump into the Hollywood bandwagon? What would be your advice?
certainly. We are, especially in film school, we are taught to conform and to stick to successful formulas and make films that are based on certain templates to get us into prestigious festivals. I did not go that route, and I just came up with stories and films that no other filmmakers were telling or that were making, and I told my story in my unique distinctive voice. And I think that's what we should all do, is to find out what makes our artistry and our sensibility singular and unique, and do what we do. We take the plunge, especially when you're just starting out. Don't be afraid to take risks and make mistakes, because that's how you really learn and evolve as storytellers and as filmmakers. And when you're submitting your films to festivals and when you're trying to get your foot in the door in Hollywood, they're not necessarily looking for the most technically polished and accomplished productions, but they are looking for storytellers that are doing something that no one else is doing. And you should celebrate what, your uniqueness and what makes you different.
Mhm. Now that Trump is on his way out, are you planning to do another movie that's inspired by that?
I think if, Lingua Franca has a sequel, it's now going to be a rom-com instead of a paranoid romantic drama. I joked about that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a positive development. And I think, kind of, it's bizarre in that I was writing the film just as he was getting elected. I shot the film 2 years into his administration, and it's now finishing its commercial run as he's, being booted out of the White House. So Lingua Franca feels like a time capsule of that political moment.
Thank you very much for the interview, and I wish we would talk to each other in person one of these days, hopefully.
Yes,
It, um,
definitely. Thank you so much, Miss
thank,
Janet. Just wanted to let you know that Lingua Franca is now streaming and available on Cinema 76 at home. You can watch it from the safety and convenience in your own home, and it's an intimate film that is best viewed in an intimate setting. So again, Lingua Franca is now showing and streaming via Cinema 76 at home, and I hope you all watch it. Thank you.